Morning, everybody. I'm Cheryldene, and I'm definitely an alcoholic.
Hey, Cheryldene.
Thanks for the meeting, and thanks, Byron, for asking me to share. Thanks for being a little chihuahua that doesn't let go. I was thinking about it this morning, and I was listening to a share while I was trying to contemplate where to go with this. And I suppose I was reminded that I don't need to go anywhere. Sure. Because my higher power kind of just takes me where I need to be. Alcoholics Anonymous was not on my checklist. It was not on my to-do list. I never believed that I was an alcoholic because my perception of what an alcoholic was definitely not who I was. And I suppose looking back at that, there is a little bit of truth in that, because an alcoholic to me becomes all those extra chairs. So my perception of an alcoholic was a person that drank every morning, started their day drinking, ended their day drinking, couldn't hold down a job, and that wasn't me. I was a functional alcoholic. I managed to hold down a job. So the more I was told you have a drinking problem, the more I said, no, I don't. And I guess that's where the truth comes in, because alcohol was my solution. It wasn't my problem. I was my problem. I don't want to go too far back into the history, but by the time I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I had lost relationships, I had lost jobs, most importantly, I had lost everything that I was, everything that I believed in. Every little bit of principle and moral and ethical behavior that was important to me had gone. I was left with emptiness, absolute desperation and emptiness. And today I can say that I'm extremely grateful for that. I'm grateful that I had lost all of that stuff before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, because I had no more choices. I had nothing left. I didn't come to AA or go into rehab because of the look on my family's faces. I was that selfish, delusional alcoholic. It didn't occur to me that my behavior was hurting everybody around me. It didn't occur to me that there was something I could do about it. I played the pity card right through my life. My father was an alcoholic. I was an abused child. And funny enough, every single relationship that I got into from the age of 16 was a toxic relationship. It always gave me an excuse to keep drinking. It always gave me an excuse to say, if you had my life, then you would do what I'm doing. So a good 15 years ago, I ended up in a wellness clinic in Johannesburg, treating anxiety and depression and comorbid tendencies and borderline schizophrenia and, all of these lovely, lovely things. And I remember going to my psychiatrist when I was there and saying to her, well, there is a drug and alcohol unit within the establishment. Do you think maybe I should go to Alcoholics Anonymous? No. Alcohol's not your problem. Which was great for me, because it just kept me in that denial. It just kept me going, thinking, well, that's not my problem. I just need to take this array of medication and everything was going to be great. So I continued drinking, I continued using, I continued doing hard drugs, and it just got progressively worse for me, because that was my only solution. I didn't think that I could change anything about who I was to try and not only for me to live a better life, but for my family. At this stage, my son was 1, I was divorced. I was in a very enabling job because my boss just loved it when I was the party girl. So we would do as much work as we could get done by 12 o'clock, and then by 12 o'clock we were out in the pubs, and that suited me perfectly. Getting home drunk, causing chaos with my partners. I remember when Cassandra was was a little girl, I couldn't wait until she went to bed because then I could go out, because I had to try to find something out there. There had to be something out there that would make me feel good. And I spent my entire life looking for that. And everything worked for a while. Everything works for a while until it wears off. I remember 2 weeks before going into the treatment facility, I was at a birthday party and I was sitting at the bar and I was trying to decide what to order, and I was thinking to myself, I'm so sick and tired of drinking, but I'll have another one of those because I didn't know anything else. I had nothing else. So when I booked myself into the treatment facility, I did not go there as an alcoholic or an addict to try to get better. I went there to change something. Something had to change. I was living in a very dark space where I did not have the energy to try and end my life, because I've been there, I've done that, I've been to the psych wards, I've done the shock treatment, I've been on the suicide watch, been there, done that, didn't work. So I know that didn't work. That wasn't going to be the solution. I didn't want to keep living the life that I was. And by the grace of God, I landed up where I did, because it's incredible, because it's quite clear treating addiction and alcoholism, but I'm not that, but that's where I'm going. And for the first week or so, I was still adamant I don't belong here. I just need to stabilize on my medication, because if I can stop taking 3 or 4 at a time, then I'll be okay, because then all these mental illnesses will just be okay. And I remember the head of the treatment facility literally throwing the big book at me because I was bored and I don't need to be here, and he literally picked up the book and threw it at me. And and I suppose within the first 2 weeks, I started listening. And I stopped saying, that's not me, I'm not like that. And slowly but surely that open-mindedness came, and I started relating to people. And I'll never forget the first meeting where I stood up and I said, I'm Cheryldene and I'm an alcoholic. The feeling of absolute relief that came over me in that meeting, because finally there was a solution. There was finally something that I could do to change. And I didn't have the finances or the resources or even the reasons to stay for the full time. I had lots of excuses. I had my flat and I had my job and I didn't have the money and I didn't have this. And for the first month, it was a real struggle for me to get that willingness to be there. I wanted to run. Every week I wanted to run. And my fellow members and my sponsors, they were just saying, just wait. And then eventually one morning I woke up and I said, okay, I'm done. Forget about the flat, forget about the job, forget about everything, I'm done. And within a week I was put on a legacy where my full stay at the treatment facility was sponsored. And that was just another indication for me of where I needed to be, because my higher power kind of just made everything happen. With just enough willingness, it will happen and it will fall into place. So I stayed the 3 months, and I suppose it was a very painful experience for me, because I had to admit and I had to accept, this is all my fault, this is all my behavior that's done this. It's got nothing to do with my drunken father or my absent mother or my abusive brother, or it had nothing to do with any of that stuff. But it had to do with the way that I responded to it. It had to do with the way that I coped with it. And I was not coping with it and I was not dealing with it. And instead I was just doing that to my family. I was exactly like that. I was the absent mother, I was the drunken mother, I was all of that. So everything that I didn't want to be, I became. So 10 years ago I was flat on the floor for the first time. It's not the only time that it's happened for me in the last 10 years. I've been flat on the floor many, many times in recovery. But the important thing is that I keep going back to basics and I keep remembering where I was and what it's like now. That gift of desperation, and that I have a disease of forgetfulness. But every now and then, my higher power whispers in my ear and he's like, remember that cold ministry that you were living in? Do you remember how you were with your daughter back then? Do you? And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember. And I get up and I go to a meeting. And I get up and I phone my sponsor. And I get up and I pray. And I do something to maintain my recovery. I've learned in recovery that little preamble that says whatever you put before your recovery you will lose. That for me is very true. And I've had to watch out for that stuff. I got into a relationship early in my second year, and by the grace of God, 8 years on, we have not killed each other yet. We've come pretty close. But and even in that, it has been a very growthful experience for me. So when they say not in your first 2 years, there is reasoning behind it. In fact, not in your first 5. Okay. Because I don't know how to treat somebody with respect. I don't know how to love somebody unconditionally until I can respect and love myself unconditionally. And it's still a work in progress, and I think for me that will be a work in progress until the day I die. As long as I'm doing this, I will have the opportunity to learn that. So what happened in the first, 4 years of this relationship is this person literally became my higher power. I would get on my knees in the morning and not ask to be of service to my higher power. It was make me the person that person needs. You know, everything I did was about pleasing that person and making that person happy, to the extent where I got extremely, extremely fearful and I got extremely dishonest because I would see that there was something going on for him, and where that took me was to start checking his phone, reading his step 11s, because if it's something to do with me, then I have to fix it and I have to change it. You know, and that took me straight back into the treatment facility. Got to a stage where I either got to go and do this again or I'm going to run. Because the feeling inside of me was the same. I woke up anxious every morning. That same feeling 15 years ago, 12 years ago, when I would put that toothbrush in my mouth and the first thing I want to do is vomit. And that is not a feeling I can live with. Because I've got to do one of two things, either strengthen my recovery or I'm going to use. You know, it was that simple for me. So I did. I went back into the treatment facility, took a leave of absence for work, and I worked the 3 most important steps, which always brings me back to the grace of God. I'm looking and it's definitely by the grace of God. I went back through step 1, step 2, step 3, and carried on working the steps 4 onwards when I got out. I had to go home and own that stuff. I had to go and tell him what I'd done. And fortunately, he was very understanding because he's an alcoholic like me. But it always comes back to me when I start feeling that anxiety of what now? And I think for the first 6 years of our relationship, I lived in fear. I was so scared that something was going to happen. And 3 years ago, when I moved out, so things were not well at home, and I've been taught in recovery that I've always got to look at myself. Always look at you and keep your side of the street clean. So I did the steps. I did a step 5 with my sponsor, which a lot of stuff came out of, and I went home and I spoke about these things, and it just carried on. There was just this constant conflict. And I made a decision that I have to leave. I have to move out because I could not stay where I was. It was detrimental to my recovery. And that's where the whole whatever I put before my recovery, I will lose. So I did. I moved out of our home and moved into a flat by myself. Very scary stuff. And a lot of truth came from that. You know, I don't want to go into too much detail, but there was a lot of truth that came from my partner from me doing that. And with that truth, we could move forward. But as long as that dishonesty stayed buried, there was no way forward. So there's always a reason why things happen. There's always a reason that I have to go through what I'm going through, because more will be revealed, you know. So that's on the relationship front. I'm going to stop on the relationship front, because that could go on for the full half an hour. I want to talk a little bit about my children. I have 3 amazing children. My daughter's 25, and my daughter to me is like my heartbeat. Maybe we should skip her. Cassandra is my heartbeat. And I was awful. For the first 7 years of Cassandra's life, I was awful. So, when I say things like I was awful, and I share a little bit about how I was, it's not because that's who I am, but that's an indication of where my disease takes me, where my disease did take me. After her dad and I separated and got divorced, she came to stay with me, and I used to feed her still pain at 6 o'clock at night so she could go to sleep, because I could not drink and take responsibility of my daughter. It was impossible for me. And although I was physically present for Cassandra in her younger years, I most certainly was not present emotionally. For me, Cassandra was given everything that she needed. She had a playroom with every kind of toy that you wanted, and that's where you belong. And I didn't think anything of it at the time, but I suppose looking back, it is a little bit mad. I built a bar next to her playroom so that I could watch her from the bar while she played. Not interact with her, just watch her. And the guy that I was living with at the time, I fell pregnant, and my son was born. And shortly after he was born, which was an extremely abusive relationship because of my behavior. A lot of people say, well, they've got a lot of judgment against people that get physical. But you know what? If I was on the other side, I would have gotten just as physical as he did. So I lost custody of Cassandra when she was, I think she must have been about 9 or 10. And that's when the wheels really, really fell off for me, and I became completely unmanageable. That was around the time when I started I wasn't only drinking, I was popping pills, I was doing street drugs, and I was getting mixed up in the wrong areas, and it was horrific. And I remember Stephen walking into the lounge the one morning, and he had Dylan in his arms, and he looked at me and he said, "We're leaving." My response was okay, because I knew, somewhere in my heart I knew that he was doing the right thing, because I could not change what I was doing, and I knew that by taking Dylan, you were actually saving him. So that was 15 years ago. Dylan turned 16 next month, and I still to this day do not have a relationship with my son. And that's God's journey, you know. And very early in recovery, I had all these huge expectations that my son's going to want to know who I am, and I'm going to make amends, and everything's going to be fabulous. And that's not how it is for this particular relationship. And I was told that it might not have anything to do with me at all. It might just be the journey that Dylan is on. And I had to accept that. And it was a very hard pill for me to swallow. The first 6 years of recovery, I fought for that. I fought to try and get to see Dylan. And eventually I sat back and I thought, well, isn't that just the same old selfish behavior? Because it's not about Dylan, it's all about me. You know, I had to show him that I was better. I had to show him that I was his mom. But that's all about me. You know, he's living in Joburg, he's got his own life, he's got his own routines, he's got his own friends, he's got a life without me. And for me to rush in there and say hi was just going to be more selfish behavior. So I put in the action and let him know through a family counselor that I am around, that this is where I am sober, and I would like to get to meet you. And I've left it in his hands. You know, and there isn't a day that goes by that I don't hope that today is the day. Because I still have hope. You know, without hope there is nothing. And I know that will happen in God's time. And if it doesn't happen in God's time, then He has a reason for that. And I've had to accept that. But what's incredible for me is the indirect amends I get to make around that stuff. You know, my partner and I met when his little girl was 2. And she's just turned 12, 2 or 3, somewhere around there, anyway. And I get to make indirect amends because here I am trying to be a proper mom to this little girl, you know, trying to be responsible and interact with her and teach her things and guide her the best way. So that's quite amazing. And I got resentful about it in the beginning because it was like a Saturday morning and here I am cleaning a house and doing washing and looking after this child, and then I thought, well, pretty amazing you can do that today, isn't it? You know, pretty amazing that you're getting out of bed today and you're doing the washing and you're making her breakfast. And then again the gratitude sets in, you know, because when I look at situations, if I don't find the gratitude in it, I'm going to hate it. So that's pretty incredible, you know, and it's not always something that I want to do, but it's always something that I try to do to the best of my ability. In last year, do we have to go back to Cassandra? Yes, we do. Okay, so my heart, Cassandra, went through some very troubling times, and about 4 years ago, she phoned me from Johannesburg to say, Mom, I need to come to you. And we'd managed to book her a flight, and I could see that Cassandra was not okay, because I am an alcoholic. So I can pick up the behavior and I can pick up all these things, and Cassandra was going out at night and not coming home until early hours of the morning, and she was focused on all of the wrong things, and as her mom, all I could do was try to guide her and not preach to her, which I had great difficulty in, because I always have to separate myself from mom and alcoholic sponsor, because I'm not her sponsor, I'm her mom. So when Cassandra arrived 4 years ago, our first trip was to the hospital to get her stitched up, and from there we went to psychologists, and we went through the routine of psychologists and medication and therapy, and she came, she stayed here for a good 3 years, she found a guy, left here, went back to Joburg, and things just kind of got worse for her. And Cassandra and I had this very toxic relationship, this very fix you, fix me. If I was in a bad space, sometimes I would phone her because she would make me feel better. And when she was in a bad space, she would phone me and I would make her feel better. And it got to the stage where that wasn't working anymore. Because, you know, much earlier on I said nothing works forever. And Cassandra was going to go into a psychiatric ward because she was back to doing what we do. You know, her disease just manifested in a slightly different way. And we begged her and pleaded her to go into the same treatment facility that I'd been in. And I'm very grateful for that, because if I hadn't walked my journey and I hadn't been where I'd been, I wouldn't have had a suggestion for her to get better, you know. And what I learned during the time that Cassandra was in the treatment facility, we were on a 5 or 6 week combat. And I want to tell you, it literally felt like my heart had been ripped out of my body. To be separated from her and not be able to talk to her and not know what was going on for her absolutely crippled me. And from that her recovery became a little bit more about my recovery, because I became aware that my disease also manifests in different ways, and that our relationship was not healthy, that our relationship was not okay. I was not helping her by doing what I was doing, and she was not helping me. So I started going to a sister fellowship, which taught me about codependency, and it taught me about people pleasing, and it taught me about my need to fix other people. And from that, I'm glad to say that Cassandra and I have a much healthier relationship today. You know, today I'm not fearful to tell her, you can't be speaking to me about this stuff. You know what you need to do with this stuff. That took me 8 months though, because I was still fearful. But when I eventually stopped doing it, and I eventually put up that boundary completely, she turned to somebody else, she turned to a sponsor. And again, I became aware that I don't have to fix everything, it's not my job. My job is to fix me. My job is to keep my side of the street clean. My job is to focus on what's important. So I suppose the last 10 years have been a real ride, and I keep learning more about me. Sometimes it's good stuff, sometimes it's bad stuff. But the bad stuff is not bad, because it gives me more of an opportunity to learn. It gives me more of an opportunity to change and to grow. And that becomes a choice. As long as I'm delusional, and as long as I'm not aware, and as long as I don't phone my sponsor, and as long as I don't look at my behavior, I'm delusional. And then I'm not willing to grow, and I'm not willing to change. And when that day comes, I know that I will go straight back to my only other solution. So I'm very grateful for step 1, 2, and 3 that always bring me back to absolute basics, back to flat on the ground, back to absolute surrender that I can't do this, please do it for me. And when I get to that stage, everything kind of falls into place. But I've got to go through moments of pain, because I'm an alcoholic. I need to feel the pain. It's not about how much pain you're in, it's about how much pain I'm in. And when I feel the pain, I'll do something about it, because I'm selfish. So, yeah, that's about it. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Cheryldene.